So first and foremost, I like to get a great sense. It doesn't matter if you're a volunteer, a board member, a staff member, or a rescue. This is all going to pertain to you. So first and foremost, in the room, how many of you either work or volunteer at a Humane Society municipal shelter? Awesome. How many of you guys are with rescues? Awesome. Okay. Wow. Okay, so we're about half and half, so that's perfect. So a lot of the examples I'm going to give, I'm going to try to do a really good job of making examples from both sides, right? Because when we start getting into the importance of team building, we're going to talk a lot about job descriptions, how to hire, things like that. And you're like, well, I'm a rescue group, or I'm a volunteer rescue group. What does that have to do with me? A lot. So really quick, how many of you feel like you're just an ordinary person and you're not sure that, what you can do to change the world? Just little old you. I'm glad there's not that many hands. I felt that way, right? How many of you want to be somebody that wants to be a part of something to change the world? That's wonderful. If you know the story about Best Friends, there was a lot of ordinary people that did some extraordinary things for all of us to be here right now, but these are very ordinary people. So if you don't think you can do something, you're wrong. But the fact of the matter is, almost everything that we're going to try to accomplish, and whether it be animal welfare, whether it be your family, they're team sports, guys. And building no-kill teams are extremely important because you need to build people that are going to help you, that are going to support you, and that are going to help you see through all of the things that you want to do. So for us in Los Angeles, where I work, we have a huge city to take on to try to do some pretty extraordinary stuff that most people think we're too crazy, this is crazy and we'll never do. But we will. We have a lot of ordinary people doing extraordinary things there, and we hope to spread that message all over. You talk about, we're here in Salt Lake City, and the things that have happened in animal welfare in Salt Lake City, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, are extraordinary. All done by ordinary people. So let's talk about how we find these teammates. What do we do to not only obtain them, keep them engaged, but also identify leadership? And we'll talk a little bit about leadership and management and some of that kind of stuff. And I'm telling you guys, it doesn't matter if you're a board member, it doesn't matter if you're a volunteer or a staff member, you need people to work along with you to carry out a vision or carry out your dream, your mission of what you're trying to do. All right, so in Los Angeles, you guys, if you look to the left, if you're facing this, look from the right to the left, you're going to see, in gray to orange, basically where we've come since 2011. 2011 is a big landmark year because that was the year before Best Friends Animal Society and the NKLA Coalition formed. It was a pretty bad year for animals in Los Angeles, and there had been a few pretty bad years on and on for LA. So just a little bit of a synopsis, about 23,000 cats and dogs were being killed or euthanized in the 6 city shelters in Los Angeles. In 2015, that is now 10,498. So that happened because of no-kill teams working together. And you can see all of the various areas, whether it was kittens, and kittens in this graph talks about underage neonate kittens. So that's what we're talking about, or cats or dogs or pit bull terriers. And in cats and dogs, it does include the kittens and the pit bulls. So why is it important to have no-kill teams? Because if you want to save lives, especially in places that are rural, spread out, or places that are urban like Los Angeles that have full cities. I don't know if you guys know this, but LA, South LA, has an area that is equivalent to the size of Paris that is all under the poverty line. South LA. 500,000 people in South LA that live under the poverty line. So, and that's just a part of our city, our wonderful city in LA. So you need a lot of different people to help you Because Best Friends wasn't going to swoop in and make Los Angeles no-kill. They're not going to swoop in and make any of this nation no-kill. We all together have to make our communities no-kill and learn how to work together, how to identify strengths, how to look at ourselves and say, this is what I'm good at, not so good at this. Who can help me with this thing that I'm not so good at? Because this is ultimately what we're after, right, you guys? We want cats and dogs to stop dying in shelters for space, stop being killed in shelters for space, and that's what we're after. And the save rates you can see as well. Why it's important? Because we want to increase the save rates. Save rates are like, if you're, I'm go back to sports analogy, if you want to know how good a pitcher it is, you usually look at their ERA. It's like the ERA for animal welfare. So it kind of gives you all of the ins and outs and how well, your community is doing. You're not going to hear me talk a lot about shelter specifics. You're going to notice I run, I get to oversee a wonderful staff that run 2 adoption centers, a spay and neuter clinic. We don't talk a lot about we have goals, but we really talk a lot about our community because that's what's important to us. And really, no-kill is about a community effort. It's not about our shelter being no-kill. It's about our community and our city being no-kill. So that's where we have a lot of partners, and that's where the NKLA Coalition comes up. So it's important to note when you talk about your rescue group, so if I have a cat rescue, right? We're completely volunteer-based. I'm the founder, and my job or my goal as the founder of Marc's Cat Rescue is to save more cats for my city shelter. I want to see the save rate go up. I want to play a part in how more cats are going to be saved. So I'm going to need different people to help me. So if I'm really, okay, and I'll be honest. So one of the things that if you talk to my staff members, I'm great about throwing out wild ideas, but I have staff members that are much better and much more organized than I am. I run an adoption center. I am not a dog behaviorist. I am not a vet. I am not, I have a lot of experience with animal medical care, but I have people within my team that are experts in that, and it's okay, and I don't pretend to be an expert in something that I'm not. But I have those team members to rely on and say, hey, what do you guys think of this? This is what I think. Because we all need different people to fill in some of those gaps. So if you're a cat rescue, you're going to probably want to do adoptions. A lot of people that get into cat rescue might not be the most outgoing, might be a little bit like our cats, right? And we love our cats, but hey, I don't know if I want to go into a very busy area and engage people and grab them and say, hey, come meet my cats. It's so nice to meet you. So I might want to try to find a volunteer that's a little bubbly, right? And I've told my staff at times when I've talked about client service people, I said, I want them to be so nice they annoy me. It's not my nature, but that's the kind of stuff because their job is to get people's attention. And you have those people and we have those friends, right, that they'll talk to anybody. They'll go work a room. I am not one of those individuals. But I have people on my team that are those individuals. So if I'm Marc's Cat Rescue, the first thing I'm going to recognize is, if somebody wants to talk to me about cats, that's exciting, but I might not be the person that's going to be aggressive enough to go out there and, grab people and bring them in and see our cats and talk to them. If they want to know every, medical term to cats, it's also something I might not know. So if I have somebody that's a little bit more medically savvy than I am, maybe that's a good team member to have. If I start growing and I, get a grant from one of these wonderful places, the Petco Foundation is going to give me a grant for my first ever staff member. I have no idea about human resources. I have no idea about benefits. So I better hopefully find somebody within my volunteer base or maybe within my board to find out that can help me there too. And this is what I'm talking about, and part of that goes into, I'm not going to be able to control everything. I'm going to actually have to trust people, to help carry out my vision. But if I'm a really good leader, hopefully I can verbalize what I'm hoping to accomplish, and that's what's going to start bringing people in to join my team. But how can we be upfront to make sure that we're getting people that are joining our team that are going to be hand in hand with us? Because the worst thing you can have is have a team where, it's like you guys are all in a boat, right? And everybody's rowing, and you have 3 people rowing this way, and then you have one person, going the opposite, right? It's the worst thing in the world. So we're going to talk about some of those identifiers, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So again, your team, so we go to the sports again, this guy. This is an animal welfare conference. We're not sports fans, but your team needs different players. So if you're a baseball team, you don't need 3 shortstops, right? You need to fill out the whole field. You need all 11 players to really accomplish what you're trying to do to win the game. And when you are a rescue or you are working in a staff environment, it doesn't matter. You need to think of it as the same way. So if I'm a cat rescue, I need somebody that's going to be, so we need to go in right now and say 70% of the cats in the shelter are dying, right? This is where we're starting. And this is probably relatively, some of you in the communities, this is exactly what you're facing. So if I'm picking my team member or I'm going into the shelter to go select cats, I'm probably going to want to, for me and my cat team, what I'm trying to do is save the most cats as possible to really help increase the save rate for my city shelter. If I'm going in there and right away I'm like, oh my God, I just pulled, these 6 17-year-old cats because they're sold and I love my seniors, right? But again, we're going back to what my mission is. What is it? To save as many animals as possible. Unless I'm really into something tapped into that some of us aren't yet, that might not have been the right move to make. And if I'm the person that knows that I can't go in the shelter and go and look at all of these faces and keep that bigger picture in mind, we need to find somebody that can handle that. You need to find somebody that can handle and deal with the environments of the shelter because these are the people that are representing you to your partners, right? So if you have somebody that's a little sassy, they don't like waiting, they get mad really quickly, and then that's your representative that's going to pull from the shelter, you may not be pulling from that shelter in the future. If something happens and they get in and you're calling the staff members idiots or those kind of things, these are the kind of things you have to think about, right? Because we're trying to accomplish our goals. So really, it doesn't matter if I'm not an HR expert, sometimes it's about the kind of personality and the jobs that we're fulfilling in our volunteer roles, right? So again, we want all the positions in the field. So you really have to take some time and say, wow, if I'm going to start a rescue, I'm going to need somebody to pull from the shelter. I'm going to need fosters. I'm going to need somebody to find those fosters. I'm going to need somebody to follow up on those fosters. So if you're going to hire me to be your follow-up person, the guy that you should see his house or his office, and it's not everything is not put away in a very nice order. Andrew, this guy that works for me here, that's a guy that I might hire, or Rita, both of these two. If you walk into his area, everything is put away. I think maybe even the dog canned food might be in alphabetical order. That's the kind of person I might reach out to and say, that guy can kind of handle my foster care areas because he's a pretty organized guy, right? So anyway, so first and foremost, job descriptions. Sounds very staff-oriented, right? But at Best Friends Animal Society, we have job descriptions for volunteers. And the reason is, first, it makes us identify, and it really makes you work a little harder to say, what do we really want out of the certain positions that we have within either our rescue group or our staff, right? And it's the first area of communication where you're telling either your volunteer or your staff member what you want from them. So, and there's job descriptions all over the internet to pull from, and you can always pull job descriptions from me. So if you want my card at the end and you want me to give you examples of job descriptions, no problem. I have no problem doing that, and we've run the gamut between the 4 different areas of work that I have. And really quick, I guess I should point out, why is this guy talking about no-kill teams? Like, what does this guy know? I've had to build the no-kill teams now in 4 different areas. Some of them I had a lot of existing, so like when I came to Los Angeles and worked for Best Friends, I had a lot of the pieces there already. I just had to maybe finagle some different people into some different areas. I've worked in, when I came to Philadelphia or sometimes Reno, Nevada, where I worked prior, I had to completely build new teams. So these are the things that I had to enact to ensure the success of places that I worked before. So Reno, Nevada, we became no-kill in 2008, and a lot of that contributed to the team members that we had there, and they're still no-kill to this day. And Philadelphia was the same way. We had this large organization where we really needed to get the right people on board to carry out our mission. So I've been there. I've had to build teams, and whether they were volunteer aspects to that or staff aspects to that, we've had to do that, and I've had to do that everywhere. And almost always it started with the basics. What jobs do I need? What do they look like? And they don't need to be War and Peace, guys, job descriptions. Kind of maybe like 5 or 6 of your basic most, if you're somebody that's going to be a volunteer adoption specialist at an event for my cat rescue, job description would probably look something like, somebody that is going to be openly engaging volunteers on weekends, the public on weekends to, in order to get our cats adopted. Somebody that is going to facilitate those adoptions, including, doing the adoption, talking about meet and greets, all of those kind of things. Follow-up adoptions might happen. It may be somebody that's doing a delivery to, home deliveries for those of you guys that don't do same-day adoptions. Some of those kind of things. But the really basic things, don't put every little thing that you can imagine they may do in a job description. That's where you just say, other duties as assigned is a good catch-all for, hey, this one thing that they may need to do once a month or every 3 months. But a lot of people want to be like, oh, I want to make sure that's in the job, as well. And for you guys that are in staff, it works that way as well. And, for instance, I had union staff members in Philadelphia, and it was the same way. I didn't need to put every single basic tenet that they were going to ever have to do, or they wouldn't have to do it. I really wanted to make sure that the basic functions of their jobs were there, but it wasn't too much, and it was something I could always go back and reference as to the position and what I was trying to communicate to them as what my expectations or what I needed from them. And it works very well and needed for job descriptions too, for volunteers too. So, again, you got to do some work, guys, on the front end. It's easy to say, well, I know I need somebody to do adoptions. Well, how do you do adoptions? What are you valuing in that person that's doing adoptions? For me, I value people that annoy me because they're so nice. So I really want somebody that's going to, exceed customer service standards, and I might spell that out a little bit. But that's really important to me because they're representing my cat rescue, and they're representing my cats, and they're helping my cats get into homes, right? So it's really important, so the specific duties. And the thing that you have to do, and it's really difficult, especially for those of us that are drowning every day, which is all of us usually in this field, because some of you have real jobs, and you do this as a hobby, right? So it's the other 40 hours of your week that you're actually doing this. So you're like, who has time for this? It is like one of those things where if you actually put the time in to begin with, you're going to be very blessed in the long-term outcome because you're not going to be hopefully treading through. And you can't always, you're going to hire people and sometimes do everything right and it doesn't work out. That's okay. But if you have a good process where you're really communicating to people, filling so they know what they're to expect, and you know that you're communicating what your expectations are to them, you can feel pretty darn good that at least you're doing your job to really try to identify and find the right people to help you do whatever you're trying to do. The adoptions in your community, an officer that's out on the field that's enforcing laws in Washington, D.C., to Marc's Cat Rescue and doing adoptions at swap meets in Pueblo, Colorado every weekend. It doesn't matter. And another thing is kind of decide where you want to look. So there's obvious places where you can do job descriptions, and including volunteers. LinkedIn will do volunteer, have a lot of opportunities for volunteers, social media-wise, Facebook, but also, things like animalsheltering.org. You can post things up there, both volunteer jobs. That is HSUS's version of animal welfare. It's when I say inside baseball, it's very much speaking to the animal welfare world. So depending, that might be a good thing, and that might be exactly what you're looking for, somebody who's very experienced. Or you might say, hey, I want somebody that's coming in with a complete open mind, and as long as they know how to handle cats, they've been around cats, I'll teach them some of that stuff, but I don't want them coming in with any preconceived notions. I want to have some outside influence. So you might want to look at some places that aren't so animal oriented, areas, so not HSUS or SAWA or places like that. So, but there's a lot of different areas where you can look around. If you're working, say, as a volunteer unit and doing like a Pets for Life type thing, right? The one thing that most Pets for Life people are going to tell you is try to fire people from the neighborhood you're working in. That makes a lot of sense, right? So if you're trying to speak to a community, say in South LA, and you have a bunch of people from Beverly Hills, you might have some challenges. Doesn't mean you can't overcome them, but you might have some challenges. And, as somebody who grew up I grew up in a very weird way. I have a mom that is rather wealthy and that grew up in a pretty middle class area of San Diego and Temecula, California. And then my father was very poor. So we lived in trailer parks. We lived at times on Indian reservations. We lived most of the time in very underserved areas. And when white people would come to our areas, it was generally to educate us in some way or another, whether it was about vaccinating our kids and things like that. And there was very much a already wall up to, okay, what are they going to tell us now? How we should, vaccinate our kids, or how we should raise our animals, what we should or shouldn't be doing. So if you get somebody from the neighborhood, there's already a familiar face, somebody that looks like me. And then, as you know, once somebody figures out and says, okay, these people aren't trying to steal my animal because they don't think I'm a good pet owner, because a lot of people think that, then you're going to be overwhelmed with the amount of support that they're going to want from you, which is exactly what you're looking for. So those kind of things. So decide where you want to look, right? So this is what I'm talking about. Primary responsibilities, war and peace job descriptions are long. If I really, really would recommend you keep them short and to the point. And again, we've already kind of talked about all of this. Make sure they're relevant to what you're looking for. And that means you actually have to think about it. Don't just go and say, oh, I found the first one. This is the animal control agency that's in the next county, and they have a job description for an adoption specialist, so I'm just going to use theirs and put my name on it. Because then they might ask you, you're looking through it, and I'm like, there might be questions that are completely irrelevant to what you're actually doing in your own roles. Interviewing. You can interview volunteers too, and sometimes it's not like an interview where you're sitting down at a table and actually asking questions. A lot of interviews are great when they're working. You just have somebody come in and work with you. Come in and volunteer with us. Let's see them in action, right? Let's not waste this time and set up 3 different interviews before we kind of bring them in, especially those of us that have volunteer-based rescues. But this is also good for staff members. I constantly inquire with my team members and my managers to say, hey, up to you guys. I don't tell them how to do their interviews. But if it was me, especially when we work for a large organization like Best Friends, sometimes hiring can take some time for us. You know what I mean? Because it has to go through some different levels. So, hey, why don't you bring them in? Why don't you talk to them a little bit? But why don't you have them work that day too? Tell them to bring some tennis shoes. And maybe let's knock some of this out too, because a lot of times we really want to see people in action. And it's not bad for them also to be able to see us in action, right? And see exactly what they're actually going to be doing. Because all of you guys know this is hard work, right? And you'll get a lot of people that'll say, oh my God, working for Marc's Cat Rescue, that sounds amazing. You know what I mean? And it's like, sometimes it doesn't feel amazing, right? You get those days where it's like, I already worked my 60-hour week, but I have events all weekend. And my wife is yelling at me because I'm never going here, and I'm just dedicated to Marc's Rescue. And, those are kind of some things that you can share with people. And you don't want to scare them away, but you also want to be very upfront about what the expectation is and what it means to do what you're doing. If you're in the field, right, and you're an officer, it's really important for us at Best Friends. We have people that work in the shelter. Erin's here. So she works in the shelter. One of the things when we hired Erin, and she, by the way, to plug her again, when are you speaking?
The last session.
Okay. Saturday, the last session. This is a good example. So when we were hiring for Erin's position, in Best Friends, some of us, I worked in shelters, a lot of us worked in shelters, but we were going to have, and Erin almost solely works in one of the hardest shelters in Los Angeles, in basically downtown LA, right outside of downtown LA. So we really wanted to make sure that person knew that, one, they were walking into a shelter with a staff that didn't all love Best Friends. And if you guys can believe it, not everybody loves Best Friends. It does happen. So no matter who Erin is or me, and we can't take that personally, right, Erin? But sometimes it feels personal. When you walk in and I'll announce and I'll say, hi, I'm from Best Friends. And they're like, oh. and they give you that dirty look. It feels like you're like the unpopular kid at school, and it's really hard to do your job and stay positive. Or if you're an officer, right? And when I used to train my officers and we did humane law enforcement and my staff, and a lot of times in Philadelphia, all we saw was cruelty. So it was easy for us to think that that's what the world was. And trying to find those officers that could still treat people with respect, to not automatically judge people because all you're doing is doing cruelty work. So everybody that you talk to from a certain community, you already have that in your head, and you're treating them like, you need to prove to me that you're a good person before I can really open myself up to you. No, it should be the opposite, even though you deal with a lot of stuff. And that's one thing we all have to realize, is that we see so much more stuff because we are a part of this world. And positivity is a huge thing for us. So we really look for people that are just positive people, right? That's not something you can teach. So there are some things that are innate that are, well, I shouldn't say you can't teach, but it's really difficult to say, this person that's always frowning, or this person that's never happy, or wants to point out 6 things of why you can't do anything. That's really hard to change. But somebody doesn't know anything about cats, but they're not afraid of cats. That's a little easier. You know what I mean? So those are the kind of things you can think about. And those are things that you can find out just doing working interviews or those kind of things. And with volunteers, it's the same way. Make sure, if this is what I want in my volunteer sect, right? I want people that are going to be nice. I want people, if I'm going to try to build a volunteer force that's going to do my adoptions, I want them to come out. I want to see them talk to people. I want to wait, right, and see if they walk up and say hello to people. When I hire certain positions, like say it's a position that has to do adoptions, I'll just sit there and see if they'll work a room, right? Are they the kind of personality that will just go and start talking to people? And those are the kind of things that I'm like, okay, cool. So they have that innate ability, and they like people. They want to go in and talk to people. Those are the kind of things I look for more than did they answer my question correctly, right? And a lot of that is is watching and having them do with you. So if you do interviews, it's really important to think about how you like to interview. So some groups like to interview as a group, right? So we have our board of directors and my cat rescue, and we'll sit down, and if it's an important job and we have somebody that's going to start handling our foster care, right, we're going to do interviews. Or if it's a staff member, like for me, our managers generally do the interviews, and they're usually single one-on-one. But they're different. So it's just something to think about how you like to set that up. The one thing I would tell you, if you're a small grassroots rescue and you want other people to buy in, or you're a manager and you have a lead, or you're an executive director and you have a manager, if it's their position or somebody that they're going to be working with directly, the more people that you bring into that process, potentially the more buy-in you're going to have, and the easier time you're going to have, rather than selecting people to work for people within your team. So if you really want to be a good leader, even if you don't agree, and my managers that I've had have hired people that I don't agree with, sometimes I've been right, sometimes I've been dead wrong. But I want them to be able to have the autonomy to make that decision. I don't think I've ever told any of my managers in LA who to hire. I don't think so, because I really don't believe in it. And I've had a manager that used to do that for me. And you can't, how am I going to hold my managers accountable? And it's not about accountability, but it's just like their buy-in, right? It's their team. They're the ones that are going to go do this thing for me. I'm not in there every day running a spay and neuter clinic. Rita is. So if she wants a team member to run spay and neuter clinic, she should be the one that's picking that, because she's the person that's dealing with it in the day-to-day, not me, even though ultimately I'm responsible for it. So I trust her, and that's how we buy in and the relationships work, and it works in the same way with your volunteers. So again, that's kind of about trying to find the right people. I think the second thing that's really important that most of us don't do because we're too busy saving animals is onboarding. What does onboarding mean? Like getting people to understand what your group is trying to accomplish, getting them into their new role, right? It's like their first 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. This is also something that takes a lot of work, right? It's really difficult. So a lot of times people will do shadow sessions, right? And that's how they onboard. It's not the worst thing in the world, but depending on who you have shadowing, I have worked in areas where everybody depending on who the person they worked with, is how they do their jobs, and it's not always the same. So if I really want to have, and we do, want to have a standardized way of how we do adoptions, or we want to have a standardized way of the quality of care that we require in our dog area, hopefully within my team, because I have a good onboarding process, everybody's learning the same thing. But you have to do the work. So by a certain time frame, you maybe want to make sure that they could clean a kennel on their own. By a certain time frame, maybe they should be able to do a dog meet and greet with somebody. By a certain time frame, they should be able to do some type of behavior. Our animal care teams now, because LA is getting so close to no-kill, a lot of them are doing a lot more behavior and training, so they have to have a certain proficiency in that now. So it's a lot of it is a time frame because you want to put the time in, but you also want to make sure that you know that your people are getting it. And especially, again, if you're a rescue group, I need to know that I can step away. I'm hiring somebody, Marc's Cat Rescue is hiring somebody to do my weekend Saturday cat adoption events. I'm going to hire them. I'm going to work with them for 2 or 3 weekends. I'm going to give them this information. They're going to read it. But by the end of the month, they have to be able to do this on their own, right? I just need to make sure that I'm giving them all of the tools to set them up for success, right? But a lot of times what we do is say, here it is. You've watched me. We're going to do one of these. Go do it. I'm too busy. Right? And it may work depending on how well they can sink or swim on their own. I wouldn't recommend it as the most valuable way to keep people around or the most valuable way to be a very good and proficient organization, whether you're small like Marc's Cat Rescue or whether you're best friends, Animal Society. Either way, it works both ways. You really have to put things in. So first and foremost, the most important thing, and the thing that I'll tell when we do new hire orientation is I'll talk about our mission in Los Angeles. And there's a couple of things that we do are very particular to the type of rescue work that we do in LA. We do promotions. We may do free adoptions. We do same-day adoptions. We do a lot of these kind of things that some people in this room even might not feel comfortable with, and it does not make me right or you wrong. But what it does is, if you're not, that's not something you can get behind. The beautiful thing about our field in animal welfare is I can get you with somebody that maybe fits more of what your philosophical beliefs are, but maybe it's not best friends. And we shouldn't think that that's the worst thing in the world because we all want to save animals and all of us have a place in this, right? And there is people that want to have rescues that are going to home deliver. There are people that want to have a rescue group that's going to take time and do 3 training sessions for every animal that's adopted that are going to follow up. You just have to find your niche in that. But what I want to communicate is we are high volume, right? We need to save as many animals as possible. I'm going to tell you why we do it. I'm going to hopefully make you understand, and then you are going to decide whether this is something that you can get behind or not. But it's not you're bad because you didn't. It's just, great, so we're not a good fit together. We still both love animals. Let's have you, I want to show you some other organizations that maybe fit your needs because that's the thing, right? We all have different philosophies, depending on every rescue. So that's really important. So how do they fit into their mission? What is their mission? What are you guys trying to accomplish? These are things that are very important a lot of times to people that are coming in. Well, I want to save, and sometimes it's location. I want to save animals in the inland valley of California because it's so bad. Inland Valley is the area of Central California, southern Central California that is very rural, and if we're focusing on the city of Los Angeles, we might not have a good fit there, right? So you're constantly having somebody that's, I wish we were really doing this. These animals need more help over there than they do in the city. The city's so much better than this. You know what I mean? These are things that are distractions. And it doesn't mean either one's right or wrong, but you want to get everybody rowing in the same direction, right? And it doesn't mean you need to have lemmings, but you want somebody that understands the mission. It's not bad to have people that are challenging what you're thinking or how you think about things, but if they fundamentally don't believe some of the tenets that you have as a foundation of what you're trying to do in your programs or your organizations, then you're going to have an issue. And you're going to have distractions. And it's like running a marathon and you're going to go 3 miles the wrong direction. You know what I mean? You might not ever finish. So it's those kind of things that you really want to make sure in the onboarding process people understand. So you really need to think about what are you trying to accomplish? And a lot of you, and I'm not trying, it's true, a lot of us get into this field because we want to help animals, but we don't know how, right? We're not sure what we do. So it's something to spend some time on as well. How do you want to help animals? I worked for organizations that were that way too. That's what called to me in LA because we had this very direct work. We were going to stop the killing of animals in the city shelters from dying from space, which called to me personally, and that's what I wanted to do. So I know when I make decisions, I can say, is this helping me save as many animals as possible in the city shelters from dying from space? And that's how we kind of make our organizational decisions, because we always go back to say, is this feeding our mission, right? Another thing that's good, obviously a lot of organizations don't have handbooks, but you probably either should get kind of a code of conduct or something really simple. And again, you can find this stuff downloadable so easy. But if you want to have some kind of like rules of engagement, for your rescue, it's probably a good idea, right? Like, let's not go on Facebook and bash each other. Let's not, air dirty laundry about our rescue to this. I'm not saying that you have to have a full-on handbook. We don't have benefits, we don't have staff, we don't need that. But you probably want some kind of code of conduct to say, hey, if you're going to be a part of our rescue, this is what we agree on. So like the NKLA Coalition has that. It's a 2-page document where we just have basically a code of conduct rules for all of these autonomous groups to agree to. And one of them is we're not going to bash and trash each other publicly. We may bash and trash each other in a room, privately. Happens a lot, actually. And that's good. It's good if it's not personal, but it's good to fight, and it's good to challenge our ideas. But what are we really trying to accomplish if we go on Facebook to do it? We're trying to get attention. We're grandstanding. And there's no need, because how many animals are dying in the face of us grandstanding or showing everybody how much better or more saintly I am because I believe this and you believe that. I mean, that's not productive stuff. So it's really important to us to make sure that those kind of standards are set. And then if they're not, we release people. And it's like, hey, you help animals. Obviously, we don't see eye to eye. We're going to let you out of the NKLA Coalition, but please continue to do what you do. We're just not going to do it together anymore in this relationship. And unfortunately, that's happened. The other thing, too, is always kind of keep an eye on things. The worst thing that you can do is say, Katie over here and she joins Marc's cat rescue, right? And then Andrew and Rita join Marc's cat rescue. And me and Katie are really close. And we've been doing this, and she was my first volunteer, and we're always at the events. And we really like Rita, but that Andrew isn't getting it. But while we're doing, the three of us are just constantly talking about it and never talking to Andrew about it, And then Rita's like, Andrew, I don't know if you know this, but, Marc and Rita are constantly saying that there's issues with you. They don't like how you don't approach people, and you're not very nice to people, and this, and that, And then Andrew, of course, is like, well, what the heck? Why are they telling? They're gossiping with us. It's this clique, the Marc and Katie clique, and all of that kind of stuff. So if you have job issues or if you have issues with people, be professional. I don't care how small you are. But if you're seeing stuff that's a problem, address it with that person. We've got to professionalize more about this. This is not about gangs or cliques or those kind of things. If you're really in this to save lives, those are the kind of things that you guys have to challenge yourselves and say, I'm not going to do this. I am going to talk to this person because I'm the person that feels this way, and I want to air this out because I don't want it to turn into this behind the back thing that ultimately will get back to Andrew and then cause problems. And then we're off in, days of our lives land, rather than saving cats. So this is something that I stole from Bain Capital. Which is a really interesting, effective, it's called the organizational wheel. Basically what it does, and it's a good tool to look at, because almost all the time when we are working in organizations, if something's wrong, it's always somebody's the issue. Oh, we're not doing that many adoptions. It's Andrew. He doesn't talk to people. He's the issue, right? But say there is, we're constantly late. We don't have the stuff that we need, right? If you look at this, if that's the case and I'm blaming Andrew, Marc might be the issue, right? Because I don't have the protocols in place for things like that. And that stuff's really hard, actually, to think about. If you don't have processes, if you don't have job descriptions, if people don't know what you want from them, then a lot of times you're already faltering. And if you see this, guys, depending on whether it's unclear roles to reduce responsiveness. They're not answering their emails, low staff morale. Everybody seems to be always upset all of the time. A lot of it will go into either leadership or that you have a culture issue, and almost always those go hand in hand, right? It really starts from the top. So if you're a person in a decision-making process, you're a part of an organization, or somebody that's coming into an organization, whoever is leading that organization is going to be pretty important because they have a lot of effect on how everything within that organization is going to work. But a lot of it, almost always problematic, is things with structure or leadership, not necessarily the person. But the easiest thing for us to change is we'll fire that volunteer, or we just won't have that volunteer work anymore, or let's fire this guy and get him out of here. So when you guys have issues, you'll get you guys can get a copy of this, or you can email it to me. Kind of look through some of this stuff if you're having problems with your rescues and things like that. And this might key you into some of the issues that you might be having. And a lot of it, I'm not going to be surprised if it's processes. You guys haven't done the time to say, this is how we do a follow-up call for an adoption. Or this is how we, put an animal out to foster and pet point. Or whatever the case may be. If you're giving people feedback, Andrew, you're just not very good with people. What is he supposed to do with that? Can you give me an example? What am I doing that's not good with people? So again, if we're going to go and talk about it, we really need to be specific. So if Rita's coming to me and saying, Andrew's just not good with people, Andrew's just not good with people, and I just go back and say, Andrew, you're just not good with people. Well, what do you mean? Well, I don't know. You're just not good with people. Those are things that are only going to cause rifts. And when you're giving people feedback, and this is good both positive and negatively, is using smart measures, specific, measurable, achievable. So if you're doing goals, and you're giving people like, hey, I really want you to say hello when we're at this event. You need to say hello and talk to 30 people. We're going to be there for 5 hours. That's this many people an hour. That's a measurable, right? So at least I know you're engaging or something like that. These are things that you can say, okay, so wow, I got to get out there and really start moving. And obviously you guys know how adoptions work. Sometimes it's not the worst thing in the world not to do an adoption right away, right? You're getting in, you're feeling somebody out, they maybe come back to you a couple of times and then they adopt. Sometimes it's wonderful when you get somebody right away and they want to adopt. But, it just clarifies the more specific you are about either feedback or about specifics that you want from somebody, whether you're giving them performance objectives, which are basically on top of the job description, areas of focus that you want people to work in. And you can give volunteers objectives too, like, hey man, I really need you to walk the red list dogs today. Or hey, I need you to walk, the red collar dogs today. I really need, that's an objective for that day, right? Can you please walk 11 dogs today? I know you said you're gonna be here for 2 hours, it's gonna be amazing. Do you think you can knock that out? That would be huge, because we wanna make sure everybody gets out today. Some specific things. Hey, I need to get play groups done today. We have 118 dogs that are available for adoption. Every day, we should have at least half of that population that gets out at least once or twice a day through play groups. Or those kind of things. Those are specific things that I can say to my dog team. This is what I expect from you. So again, starts from the top, goes back down. You want to make sure that you're being very clear with how you're organizing. So if you're the top of an organization and I have managers, I want to make sure that I'm being very clear with our expectations of how we're doing things, because then they're doing the same thing to their team, right? Again, be specific. Good feedback, factual, clear. Factual. You guys, we are in an age where there's so much information, and you guys know about it. If you're on Facebook, sometimes you're like, did this person really die? Is this real? Is this newscast really real? Like, did Morgan Freeman really die? Because I thought he died last month. He didn't. Is he dead? And it's the same thing sometimes when we have problems. You're not at the event, right? So you have two people that are saying something happened out of the event. You're going to have to do some investigating to really find out. You don't know. So don't go on whims. Don't go on information that you don't have. You really have to do some work to make sure that you're making decisions based on factual information, firsthand information, okay? Believe this or not, people expand the truth. People that are emotional sometimes will over-exaggerate. So sometimes you really need to get down to the bottom of things before you, so writing somebody up, say, or kicking somebody out of your program or saying you're never going to volunteer with me again before really doing your due diligence is not a good thing, right? It doesn't make you look good. Being poor, broad, ambiguous, that's the example of, Andrew, you're not good with people. Great. that's some things that I can really work on. You know what I mean? Like, Andrew, you're a little terse. Let me give you an example. When somebody walks up and says that, they're looking for a guard dog, maybe ask them a couple of questions before you just say, we don't adopt guard dogs. So, my favorite picture in the world. Sometimes the hardest thing that you can do is when you have a bunch of people, right? So some of us have rescue groups that have a bunch of board members, right? And we all make decisions together. We are a democracy. We don't have a leader. We're not a dictator. We don't have a dictatorship. Sometimes it's really important when you're hiring somebody or something to maybe use something like a RACI chart to try to identify who's doing what in a project. Even somebody like hiring somebody, say. So say I want to hire one of my managers, right? But I have 5 other managers. So, and this person is going to be the dog care manager. So that means he's going to have to interact with the cat team. He's going to have to interact with my medical person and my adoptions person. So I'm going to probably make them a part of the interview process because I want their buy-in too, right? I want them to meet and I want their feedback. I want their help actually to tell me what they think because I value them. They're my partners. So, but when I do this, if Rita, who's one of my staff members, says, I really, really like Andrew, and then I go ahead and I don't hire Andrew, if I didn't roll out and let her know, like, hey, I'm going to really take into account what you say, but I'm going to ultimately have to make the decision, at least she's already walking into knowing and saying, like, hey, I'm going to give this guy my feedback. She still might feel something about it and say, I can't believe you didn't hire him. He's an idiot. I told him he was great, and he didn't do it. But at least she's not expecting her to be a part of being able to make that decision. So when you do a RACI chart, it's really just saying who's responsible, who's accountable for the decision, who's consulted. So in that process, my other managers would be consultants. Right? I'm going to use them to also interview this person and bring me feedback, right? But ultimately, I'm the person that is going to be accountable. So, and my boss, or I may be ANR, depending. So if my managers are making the decision, they're going to probably consult their colleagues on it. They're going to make the decision, and I'm going to be the person responsible. The informed are probably the rest of the dog team, right? Who's going to be their new manager? What's going on in the process? So it's just kind of dividing and making sure that everybody kind of understands. And if you're doing big projects like, hey, we're going to open up, we're going to start putting cats in a Petco. There's a lot of different things that a lot of different people need to do. So using something like this to identify, areas may be helpful for you. So just a tool to throw out there that I use a lot, RACI charts. Keeping teams together, keeping them motivated, right? Feedback, guys. If you give one negative thing, try to give 5 positive things, especially if they're doing positive things. It's not much different than dog training. If my wife wants me to do something, she usually rewards me by saying, hey, honey, thank you so much, over and over again, because she's training me to make sure I do the dishes all the time, right? Or to and contribute or do what I need to do. She's training me just like she would train our family dog. And a lot of it is the same thing with us. We all want to feel like we're doing a good job for the people that we work for. And if they're communicating to us and saying, man, you're doing great, or man, I really like how you did this, or man, I'm really excited about how you did this, that means so much to people because, one, you're giving them good feedback that they're doing the right thing, so they're going to hopefully continue to do more of that. And secondly, it's feedback, right? So it doesn't always have to be negative. And for us, for some reason, a lot of times we only give feedback when things are going wrong. And that's something to think about because we're too busy saving animals. I hate that excuse, and I hear it all the time from rescues that I work with. Well, I can't do that stuff. I'm too busy saving animals. So conferences, classes, certifications, any of those kind of things. Idea exchanges, maybe just bringing them in if somebody's speaking. We try to bring people in. Any of those kind of things that you think about that might help some of your staff members. The other thing to think about, you guys, too, Groundhog Day is really what ultimately kills volunteers and staff members. So the more that you can do some task variety or skill variety. So if you work in a vaccine, in a spay-neuter clinic, one of the hardest things is that it really is sometimes feels very assembly line like work. So trying to variety and skill, get a variety of skill. That's why you'll see a lot of vaccine. There's like 2-year limits and people kind of move on to the next area and the next area because there's not a lot of skill variety in that. But, those are the kind of things to think about. Autonomy, giving people, making them understand you can make this decision on your own and I'm going to trust you. That really gets people buy-in. Having them understand how their tasks work. We have people that work overnight that don't see it, but we're like, guys, if you don't get this done, all of this stuff in the day falls apart. It's so important what you do. Those kind of things. Tough things are going to happen when you work in this field, right? You're going to have a bad adoption. Sometimes it goes wrong. You should talk about it. You should bring it up. If something's hard or something's really bad, we do kitten nurseries. So in the summer, we really have a hard time because we do everything right a lot of times, and we still don't. All the kittens don't survive, and that's really hard. So identifying that and letting people say and express those feelings are not a bad thing, and not hiding from those. Staff volunteer events and parties, they don't have to cost money. You can do potlucks, just something that shows a little appreciation. Those are the kind of things that really can keep people engaged with you. What you ultimately, guys, want to do is express, because and if you don't, you're not a good leader. You're not going to do anything by yourself. You have to have people around you if you want to accomplish a goal like saving animals' lives. You're going to run yourself into the ground if you're a one-woman or one-man show. So teams are so vitally important no matter what you're doing. And understanding people's roles. Development, the office staff, they get to do whatever they want. They just sit on their butts. They don't get to do any of this. Well, no, they bring in all the money for us to do this, right? Or they have to build your schedules. Or they're the ones that are on the computer at 11 o'clock at night when you're not taking any of this home with you. So it's really helping people understand bigger picture, which we all don't always see in our roles, right? We see what's in front of us. So let's take some questions in the next couple minutes. But I just want you to think about this too. When you think about good leaders, try to identify good leaders or people that you've thought in history are good leaders. These are 4 of mine that I think about a lot. And I just study kind of the things about them, of what I love about them. And those are things that I try to emulate. Or I try to identify. So Charlie's got the mic over here if anybody has any questions.